Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Dimpy and on this channel I share watercolor tutorials every Saturday. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to support my channel. In today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to paint these beautiful pansy flowers. This tutorial is ideal for beginners. I will also share some useful tips on how to paint abstract backgrounds which can be used for any subject. For all the materials I have used, please check the description box below. We would be using a limited color palette comprising of just 4 colors: permanent yellow, Quinadricone violet, Dioxazine violet and Payne's grey. So let's get started. So I've got my A6 watercolor paper sheet and we'll start by drawing a rough outline of the pansy flowers. I'm using an HB pencil and I advise that you keep your sketch really light because it's really hard to get rid of these lines after you paint over it. As you can see, these flowers are really easy to sketch out as well. You can see just like a ribbon shape and then an inverted heart at the bottom, and I'm just drawing a few more kind of overlapping petals. So just 2 petals at the top and that's it really. I'm drawing a smaller flower just right behind this flower, exactly the same way as I did this one, so it's very simple to follow. So sketch is done and we'll start painting with the flowers. And here we will not wet our sheet, we are working wet on dry. So I'm using a size 6 Taylor and Rowney pointed brush and I'm just carefully going around the top petal, as you can see, and just spreading the paint around. While the paint is still wet, I'm dropping in some Dioxazine violet color as well. So for the petals underneath, I am pre-wetting my paper before dropping the color. So you can notice not entire petal is being wetted, just a portion of it where I want to drop in the color, and I do not want very fine lines or hard edges, and that's the reason why I pre-wet my paper. So this really gives me some soft edges towards the center of the petal. So for this bottom petal, I am again working wet and dry. I'm literally referring back to my reference picture to paint this. So the topmost petal should be dry before you start painting the petal adjacent to it, otherwise it may not give you a defined edge and they might just merge into each other. So I've taken a slightly darker color this time. So our first flower is done and we're going to repeat the process for the second flower. So this time started with some cadmium yellow lines right at the center of the flower, and this flower looks slightly different in my reference picture, so I'm just working wet and dry again, and a few lines here and there. So if you're in a rush to paint the adjacent petal while the first petal is still wet, I'd advise that you leave a slight gap in between, or just kind of drop in a slightly darker color right at the edge of the first petal. As you can see, I'm using just one brush for my painting because it's got a very fine tip which allows me to draw fine lines as well, and I can just use the belly of the brush if I want to paint slightly larger areas like the petal. Now our first layer is dry, and I'm going over and adding some darker tones to my petals where required, especially where I want to differentiate between the two petals and kind of just create that line of Okay, so I guess the flowers are now done, and it is advisable for them to be completely dry before starting to paint the background. And in order to paint the background, we're gonna just pre-wet our paper just around the flowers carefully. So I'm using a size 12 brush here, and we want our background to be really abstract sort, so we're not really specifically painting any leaves as such. So I'm using a darker green color, which is Sap Green. I think I didn't mention it previously, but yeah, Sap Green. And then I'm just dropping in some Payne's Gray right towards the left side of this bottom flower. So we want to create some sort of contrast, so that's why it's important to have some darker shade just near the petals, and then we can just fade it out as we go into the background. Some more Payne's Gray. So there are a variety of techniques that you can use for the background, like splattering, using salt, splashes. So I'm just sprinkling some salt to the background while the paint is still wet. So it's important to do it at the right time, or you would not get the effects you are expecting. So while the background is drying out, I decided to add a few folds to our petals using very dilute Payne's Gray color. This makes the flower looks more realistic because we are adding some sort of 3-dimension to the petals. See the salt just kind of settling in one place, so I'm just kind of spreading it out, and I think the background has really dulled out. You can also use a effect wherein you're just kind of dropping in some water droplets while the paint hasn't completely dried. That also gives you really nice effects. So it's just like, just experiment with these different techniques and see how your background turns out, and I assure you that results going to be different every time. I just thought the paint's still wet and let me drop in some darker color while it's still wet, because I think the background looks a bit dull to me still. So I'm just dropping in some bamboo green color. just in certain areas, not necessarily the whole background. We want to have those varied tones, and that's what makes it look abstract. So that's how it looks currently, and we'll wait for it to be completely dry and see how it looks. So here is our finished painting. I also did some splattering with green paint once the background was completely dry and added some leaves using negative painting technique, but unfortunately that did not get recorded. You can choose to omit that step as you will still get a beautiful painting. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing and don't forget to hit the notification bell to get notified about future videos. I hope to see you next Saturday again with another tutorial. Till then, take care. Bye.